Hey everybody, this is Phillip Heilman from the Florida Times Union and Jacksonville.com. I am in Pittsburgh, actually just outside PNC Park, which is where the Pirates play baseball. Not quite baseball season yet, but it's a nice quiet spot on a busy downtown day in Pittsburgh. The weather's not too bad right now, about probably in the 50s, I would say. They're expecting to have a few feet of snow and some cold rain tonight, early Saturday morning, and definitely by game time Sunday, 1:05 kick. Obviously, the Jags are in Pittsburgh playing the Steelers. Expected to just be a brutally cold day, but the Jaguars do have a little bit of experience with that. They played in Nashville, obviously, against the Titans in Week 17 in a game that was 23 degrees at kickoff. They played in Cleveland earlier this season in a game that was 38 degrees at kickoff. So not a ton of experience in the cold weather, but a little bit, and I think that will make a difference. Talking to guys in the locker room this week, Avery Jones said he's from the South and it's going to be cold if it dips below 60, but he's figured out a way to play through it. With specialists Brad Nortman, Josh Lambo, that's something to keep an eye on. Particularly with Lambo, will his range be a little bit smaller than it normally would be, just because of the field? Obviously, Heinz Field is known for having very swirly winds. In addition to the weather, we thought we would take a look at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette sports page today and just kind of see what the people in town are talking about and what is being written about, and hopefully you can see it. But the big centerpiece today at the top of the sports section is how Pittsburgh needs to be run stoppers. And in the first game, the Steelers had a really tough time containing Leonard Fournette. That is what Ed Boucher wrote for today's paper. He pointed out that aside from Leonard Fournette's 90-yard touchdown at the end of the game, the Steelers limited him to 27 carries for, let me see here, 27 carries, got to get my ducks in a row, 27 carries for 91 rushing yards for Leonard Fournette in that first game before the 90-yard touchdown, which was just a 3.4 yards per carry average. So his point was kind of the Jaguars didn't do a ton of great things on offense in that first game, even though the score was 30-9. And the Pittsburgh defense was pretty happy with the way that they had played for most of the game. The quote from the defensive coordinator is, "We just guessed at that," referring to the 90-yard touchdown. "We didn't fit where we were supposed to fit. They were just trying to make a play instead of doing what they were supposed to do." And a lot of times in late game situations, defenses are pretty much selling out to stop the run. It was an opportunity for the Jaguars to make a play, and they did. And honestly, that was one of the few, turned out to be one of the few long runs by Leonard Fournette. Obviously, he also had the 75-yard touchdown against the Rams at Everbank Field, but not a ton of huge runs for Leonard Fournette this season, but that was certainly one of them, and it was one that kind of changed the way the stats looked in that game. The Gazette points out that the Steelers outgained the Jaguars. They had 21 first downs to 15 for the Jaguars, 2 extra minutes of time of possession, 301 yards passing to 82. So, reading this, it sort of does, you do kind of get the feel that a lot of people around here think that Week 5 game was a fluke. Was it? Maybe. Was it not? Who knows? Will it be a 30-9 game on Sunday? That seems unlikely. Pittsburgh has won 10 of 11 games since then. They won 8 in a row right after the Jaguars game. So they're definitely playing good football, but the Jaguars are, they're going to have some confidence coming in here just because of what they did earlier this season. Another story here is just kind of looking at the violence of football, talking about Travis Kelce getting knocked out of their playoff game against Tennessee last week. That was actually former Jaguar Jonathan Cyprien laying the hit there. Also a mention of Dante Fowler slamming Tyrod Taylor's head so hard into the Everbank Field grass that he sent him straight into the concussion protocol. So yeah, definitely football still a violent game for anybody who wasn't too sure about that. The story I thought was particularly interesting inside the Gazette today, the sports section, just reading here. A little bit of wind here. It's going to probably pick up. Doug Marrone says anything under 15 miles per hour is not that big of a deal. He called it 10 miles per hour out of the west earlier this week, so he's not super concerned. But it doesn't make for turning a newspaper very well. But yeah, so a story inside the Gazette today is on Martavis Bryant, who right now is kind of the Steelers' number 3 receiver. Obviously, you have Antonio Brown, who is dealing with a calf injury. He's been back at practice this week. I would fully expect Brown to play and have a normal role in their offense, which means that, Jalen Ramsey probably will be shadowing him. Brown had 10 catches for 157 yards in that Week 5 game, but it took him 19 targets to get there, so only a little more than 8.3 yards per target in that game, and that's kind of playing him to a draw, and that's what you want. But the story here that's pretty interesting, in 3 playoff games, Martavis Bryant has 19 catches for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also has chipped in with 90 rushing yards on 4 carries. He's kind of a guy who has been overshadowed a little bit this year. Juju Smith-Schuster has come on. He's a rookie from USC, second-round pick, has 7 touchdowns. Martavis Bryant was actually benched earlier in the year. There was some question whether he was asking for a trade, whether he wanted out. He was unhappy with his role in the offense, but he's a guy who, for having a tailspin in the middle of the season, has certainly bounced back well. He's made some big plays of late, and as this story points out, he's had several big games in the playoffs. So that'll be something that's kind of very interesting to watch, just how the Jaguars attack them. Like I said, I fully expect Jalen Ramsey to cover Antonio Brown. I would imagine you'll see a lot of A.J. Boye on Juju Smith-Schuster. So that could leave Aaron Colvin to cover Martavis Bryant. Or if it works out where Juju is playing a lot out of the slot, you could see Colvin playing more on Juju and A.J. Boye playing on Martavis Bryant. I think that's going to be a really fascinating kind of subplot for the game, is just how the Jaguars' talented group of cornerbacks can match up with Pittsburgh's receiving group, which, talking to several guys, especially the defensive guys this week, and just asking them, hey, is this the best receiving group we're going to face this week? Is that the best one you're going to face all season? And all of them, just shook their head. Yes, this is definitely a group that, in terms of just the sheer number of playmakers, other teams don't really have. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how the Jaguars deploy their cornerbacks. Aaron Colvin had the first interception of his career last week, which is hard to believe, in his 4th year. He's played really good football for the Jaguars, mostly in the slot. He was battling the flu a little bit last week. He was actually said he was throwing up before the game in the locker room, throwing up on the sidelines. Eventually had to come out because he was just too weak to keep going. He was limited early in the week in practice, was back to being a full practice participant later in the week, so I expect him to be a full go, and the Jaguars certainly need him. After Colvin, you look at someone like Tyler Patman, who came in against the Bills. I thought he did just fine. Didn't see anything where he gave up any sort of big plays, but at the same time, Buffalo's offense was Kelvin Benjamin, Zay Jones, Charles Clay, the tight end. Clearly not the caliber of options that the Steelers have. So you want definitely Colvin, Ramsey, and Boye to all be a go. Another interesting story today, something that just came out last night, which doesn't particularly pertain to the game, but just moving forward, kind of what the Steelers are going to be in the future, is Le'Veon Bell not really threatening, but saying that he's serious about wanting a long-term contract, and if he were to get the franchise tag placed on him again in the offseason, he would consider sitting out the entire 2018 season or even retiring. He said they have him quoted as, "I hope it doesn't come to that, but I would definitely consider it. Just get the numbers straight, exactly where we want them. I'm not going to settle for anything. I know what I do and what I bring to the table. I'm not going out here getting the ball 400 times if I'm not getting what I feel I'm valued at." That's kind of interesting to hear, just because he's only 25 years old, I believe, still a young guy, has a lot of career ahead of him. So it'll be interesting. That'll be sort of a subplot. But as far as Le'Veon in this game, he's another guy who I thought the Jaguars did really well against in Week 5. 15 carries for 47 yards. I think he had 7 or 8 catches, but only another 40 or 50 yards. He didn't have any big plays, and he's one of those guys where he's just as big a threat in the passing game as he is in the running game. He had 85 catches this season, which is pretty ridiculous for a running back. So yeah, definitely Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, Juju Smith-Schuster, Le'Veon Bell. A lot of options in the passing game, so the Jaguars are going to certainly need to step it up on defense, particularly if they can't get the running game going. I think it's really, just interesting that, as I fold this back up, just how much talk there is about Leonard Fournette. He only has 2 100-yard rushing games in his last 8 games, and that does not include the 3 games that he missed, 2 due to injury, 1 because of the rule violation. So he's a guy who early in the season was having a little bit more success. In the Rams game, he had a lot of success, and obviously against the Steelers, he had a lot of success. And he did have a good game, I thought, against Seattle, but didn't make a lot happen last week against Buffalo. Missed an opportunity early in the game on a slant pass, which he said yesterday he thinks if he would have caught it, it would have been a touchdown. It would have been a 60, 70-yard touchdown. A very long play was early in the game, but he said he couldn't even see the ball because the linebacker jumped in the way, hit off his hands, and just an opportunity missed. The Jaguars can't afford to have that happen. They pretty much have said all week long they know that they're not going to be able to score 10 points again and win this week. Blake Bortles only threw 14 passes in the Week 5 game. He doesn't really consider that a feasible way to attack this game again, because it's one where they're probably going to have to get into the end zone, I would say probably at least 2 or 3 times, and have a couple of other productive drives just to hang in there. I think they're a 7.5-point underdog right now still. That's kind of held steady. But as I said on a video earlier this week, I would take the Jaguars and the points just because I think it's going to be a field goal game, maybe a 2 field goal game. I don't think it's going to be a touchdown. Interesting quote here from defensive lineman Cam Hayward, Pittsburgh defensive lineman Cam Hayward, talking about the first game. It was the perfect storm, but there are still things we could have done to correct that. Whether it's Blake Bortles on 3rd and long, that was his only scramble of the game. We can't give that up because if we get off the field, you never know what happens. Also, he goes on to say we just have to be more opportunistic. We have to create more turnovers. One interception is not going to do it. We have to have more splash plays. If they're going to do that to our offense, we have to be willing to do that to their offense. So that's very interesting, I thought. And it's interesting also that Hayward's talking about the plays that Blake Bortles was able to make with his legs in the game earlier this season, because he's coming off a game where he just ran 10 times for 88 yards, the most rushing yards in his career. I think it was the most rushing yards for a quarterback in franchise history for a playoff game. And you have to wonder if the Jaguars would have even beaten Buffalo if Blake couldn't have started making some plays with his legs. He had a 20-yard run, I think a 12-yard run, 19-yard. So a couple of big chunk plays. Obviously, in the passing game, only one receiver caught a pass. Not going to do it. Just going through a couple of injury notes here. 3 defensive starters. Quarterback Artie Burns with a knee, defensive end Stephon Tuitt with an elbow, and defensive back Javon Hargrave with a back did not practice Thursday. The Post-Gazette says that Burns and Tuitt said they hope to play Sunday. Antonio Brown was a full participant for the 2nd day in a row, and offensive lineman B.J. Finney was a full participant. So, like I said earlier, I fully expect Antonio Brown to be a full go. I think that's going to just be a heavyweight matchup with Jalen Ramsey. Obviously, Ramsey's a guy who's got the confidence to not back down from anybody. I think that's going to be just a fascinating watch. Artie Burns is a guy to watch. He's probably Pittsburgh's, I'd say healthiest, and prior to this, best cornerback. The Steelers picked up Joe Hayden early in the season. He broke his leg, so Burns is a guy who probably would have spent a lot of time on D.D. Westbrook, kind of the speedy guys. Also could have covered Keelan Cole. So it'll be interesting to see. That was apparently a non-contact knee injury earlier in practice this week. So the Steelers are a little banged up on defense. The Jaguars are going to have an opportunity to make some plays. That's about it from today's sports section in the Gazette. They did a fine job. Definitely would encourage anybody, if you haven't read in the Times-Union today, John Reed, my colleague, took a look at Jalen Ramsey versus Antonio Brown, what it kind of means. I thought Jalen had a lot of really interesting quotes. He's kind of a guy sometimes where you don't get a lot out of him. He has very short answers. He doesn't like to glow about his own play, doesn't like to glow about other teams' plays, but he was a guy, he said, hey, Antonio Brown is one of the best receivers in the league. I've got to give him all due respect. He spoke very high level. I think he's definitely looking forward to that matchup. For tomorrow, I'm taking a look at Juju Smith-Schuster, a guy I mentioned a little bit earlier. In the 4 games earlier this season before the Jaguars-Steelers game, he only had 8 catches. Going back to the last 4 games of the regular season, he had 25. So clearly he's become, this Juju is not the Juju they faced early in the season. I think he had 4 catches for something like 58 yards against the Jaguars. So that's going to be a fascinating one to watch. And then, of course, Ryan O'Halloran is leading the coverage as always. He's got the Jaguars cover from A to Z. So I'm going to go figure out what else is going on around Pittsburgh. You can follow me on Twitter at Phillip Phillip underscore Heilman, Heilman. That's Phillip underscore Heilman. I'm going to be tweeting just kind of anything I notice, observations from around Pittsburgh, some pictures. Took one of PNC Park earlier. Going to walk over to Heinz Field now. It's such a nice day. They told me to take an Uber around town, but I'd rather just hit the pavement. Looking for Jags fans as well. So if you're a Jags fan in the Steel City, let me know. I would love to meet up with you, grab a bite, chat, grab a beer, anything that I can expense, especially. So look for more videos throughout the weekend. I think it's going to be a really interesting game. And like I said, Phillip underscore Heilman on Twitter. Follow Ryan O'Halloran on Twitter, and John Reed, I think, is John Reed 64, but I'm sure you can find his stuff. And also, just read Jacksonville.com. We'll have stuff all throughout the weekend. So thanks so much, and I'm going to go see what Pittsburgh has to offer.